It's part of even a larger community that is about 10,000 square miles and appears to have been constructed, are you ready for this, from 160,000 to 200,000 BCE. This is incredible. This predates everything ever and pushes back the limits of archaeology and history as we know it, if this is correct. The region is somewhat remote, and the circles have often been encountered by local farmers who assume that they were made by some indigenous people in the past, but oddly, no one ever bothered to inquire about who could have made them or how old they were. This changed when researcher and author Michael Tellinger teamed up with Jordan Hine, a local fireman and pilot who had been looking at these ruins from his years of flying over the region. Hine had the unique advantage to see the number and extent of these strange stone foundations and knew that their significance was not appreciated. I had no idea of the incredible discoveries we would make in the year or two that followed. The photographs, artifacts, and evidence we have accumulated points unquestionably to a lost and never-before-seen civilization that predates all others. Not just by a few hundred years, or even a few thousand years, but many thousands of years, plural. These discoveries are so staggering that they will not be easily digested by the mainstream historical and archaeological fraternity, as we have already experienced. It will require a complete paradigm shift in how we view our human history. That's from Tellinger, in his retelling of this incredible story of the metropolis found in Africa, brought to you by Dan Eden through ViewZone. And that is a remarkable story, and I would love to spend more time on this right now, but we need to move on to the science and technology news. But let me just say that if this is proven correct, this really will change everything historically. I mean, this isn't the first case that, where something has come up that bewilders scientists when it comes down to, the chronology of history. Spark plugs being found and embedded in coal, which takes thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of years to form. The Antikythera computer found, which is at least a couple thousand years old, if not more, embedded in coral or sea rock underwater, something to that effect. Anyway, pay attention to this stuff. There's more to this than meets the eye. I'd like to get into that more at a later date, but now we are going to get involved with the science technology news. That's right, science technology news. We don't have a whole lot of time left on the program today, so it's going to be quick. I need to go back to October and talk about the Large Hadron Collider. It's incredible. I know the stories have been circulating forever, but it's just such a great story, and there's a neat trail of stories that come with this one. Hopefully I'll have enough time to get a couple in before we move into the audio zone here to finish up the program for today on CKDU 88.1 FM. This first story comes to you from the New York Times. Way back in October, the collider, the particle, and a theory about fate. More than a year after an explosion of sparks, soot, and frigid helium shut it down, the world's biggest and most expensive physics experiment, known as the Large Hadron Collider, is poised to start up again. In December, if all goes well, protons will start smashing together in an underground racetrack outside Geneva, in a search for forces and particles that reign during the first trillionth of a second of the Big Bang. Yes, I said it correctly, the first trillionth of a second of the Big Bang. This is a big deal. And then it will be time to test one of the most bizarre and revolutionary theories in science. I'm not talking about extra dimensions of space-time, dark matter, or even black holes that eat the Earth. No, I'm talking about the notion that the troubled collider is being sabotaged by its own future. A pair of otherwise distinguished physicists, get this, have suggested that the hypothesized Higgs boson, which physicists hoped produced with the collider, might be so abhorrent to nature that its creation would ripple backward through time and stop the collider before it could make one. Like a time traveler who goes back in time to kill his grandfather. Holger Beck-Nielsen of the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen and Masao Ninomiya of the Yukawa Institute for Theoretical Physics in Kyoto, Japan, put this idea forward in a series of papers with titles like Test of Effect from Future in Large Hadron Collider, a Proposal, and Search for Future Influence from LHC, posted on the physics website arxiv.org. in the last year and a half. According to the so-called standard model that rules almost all physics, the Higgs is responsible for imbuing other elementary particles with mass. It must be our prediction that all Higgs-producing machines shall have bad luck, Dr. Nielsen said in an email message in an unpublished essay. Dr. Nielsen said of the theory, well, one could even almost say that we have a model for God. It is their guess, he went on, that he, rather, hates Higgs particles and attempts to avoid them. This malign influence from the future, they argue, could explain why the United States Superconducting Supercollider, also designed to find the Higgs, was cancelled in 1993 after billions of dollars had already been spent. An event so unlikely that Dr. Nielsen calls it an anti-miracle. You might think that the appearance of this theory is further proof that people have had ample time, perhaps too much time, to think about what will come out of the collider, which has been 15 years and $9 billion in the making. The collider was built by CERN, C-E-R-N, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, to accelerate protons to energies of 7 trillion electron volts around an 18-mile underground racetrack and then crash them together into primordial fireballs. For the record, as of the middle of September, CERN engineers hope to begin to collide protons at the so-called injection energy of 450 billion electron volts in December, and then ramp up that energy until the protons have 3.5 trillion electron volts of energy apiece, and then, after a short Christmas break, real physics can begin. Maybe. Dr. Nielsen and Dr. Ninomiya started laying out their case for doom in the spring of 2008. It was later that fall, of course, after the CERN collider was turned on, that a connection between two magnets vaporized, shutting down the collider for more than a year. Dr. Nielsen called that a funny thing that could make us to believe in the theory of ours. He agreed the skepticism would be in order. After all, most big science projects, including the Hubble telescope, have gone through a period of seeming jinxed. At CERN, the beat goes on. Last weekend, the French police arrested a particle physicist who works on one of the collider experiments on suspicion of conspiracy with a North African wing of Al-Qaeda. Dr. Nielsen and Dr. Ninomiya have proposed a kind of test that CERN engage in a game of chance, a card-drawing exercise using perhaps a random number generator in order to discern bad luck from the future. If the outcome was sufficiently unlikely, say drawing one spade in a deck with 1 million hearts, the machine would either not run at all or only at low energies, unlikely to find the Higgs. Sure, it's crazy, and CERN should not and is not about to mortgage its investment to a coin toss. The theory was greeted on some blogs with comparisons to Harry Potter, but craziness has a fine history in a physics that talks routinely about cats being dead and alive at the same time and about anti-gravity puffing out the universe. As Niels Bohr, Dr. Nielsen's late countryman and one of the founders of the quantum theory, once told a colleague, "We are all agreed that your theory is crazy. The question that divides us is whether it is crazy enough to have a chance of being correct." Wow. It's a crazy, crazy experiment happening at the LHC. That story comes to you from the New York Times. What do you think about that? Email us at unifiedfieldradio@gmail.com. Let us know. Send us your comments and concerns. That's all the time we have today for the science technology news. It's time for the Audiozone. Here's your interview from the Unified Field. Andrew Basiago